Hey, Thursday, July 7th, 2022. I'm Larissa. I'm going to read some more of my cookbook here in a minute. Crazy stuff going on in the world, huh? I don't know. I'm always here in this place, so sometimes it's like living in a vacuum. I feel like a little figurine in some sort of strange snow globe. Anyway, in my kitchen, on my table, Lenten Tales of Culinary Traditions by Larissa Dahroug. Chapter 3, Mac and Cheese, Chowder, and Vegetable Soup. Who doesn't like mac and cheese? This dish is so beloved by Americans that even the vegans try hard to recreate an animal product-free version. I've had it in a number of vegan restaurants, most notably Solely Vegan in Oakland, California. Solely Vegan is one of the best vegan eateries I've been to. The a la carte style menu is, I don't know if they're still open or not, entirely vegan versions of classic American soul food dishes. While I wouldn't ever claim the vegan versions taste anything like the real deal, many of the dishes were excellent. In particular, I enjoyed their fried okra, gumbo, and mac and cheese. When Omar and I first moved to Oakland, we ordered takeout from them a couple times a week. Growing up, my mother made mac and cheese at least once a month, and most certainly during the season of Lent. I'm not talking about box mixes, though she did make those for us for lunch from time to time. I'm talking about good old homemade mac and cheese, but my mother dressed her version up a bit to boost nutritional values. She was always concerned we weren't going to have enough protein in our diet, so she added peas and tuna fish to the dish. You might think that sounds like tuna mac, but it's not. The classic American dish of tuna noodle casserole is something else altogether and does not include a cheese sauce. The sauce in a tuna noodle casserole is a simple bechamel. The cheese sauce for my mother's mac and cheese starts as a bechamel, but has cheese added to it. I sometimes make it this way as well because it's so very delicious. But nowadays I frequently change the process a bit and omit the bechamel, instead opting to dust my grated cheese with cornstarch and adding veggies like broccoli, spinach, marinated artichoke hearts, olives, and or mushrooms. This cuts the calories and fat a bit, but also makes it a one-dish meal. Making my mother's recipe requires a side salad or vegetable of some sort to make the meal complete. I will address both variations because they are both good. So this is how you make my mother's mac and cheese. Ingredients. 1 pound, 1 box, small pasta like shells, elbows, or springs. You want something small and ornate to hold all the sauce and be a satisfying texture in your mouth. 2 cloves of garlic minced, 1 white onion diced, 1 can of tuna drained and flaked, 1 cup frozen peas, 1 good-sized brick of cheddar grated, 2 cups of milk, a 1/4 cup of flour, 1 stick of butter, salt and pepper to taste, 1/4 cup breadcrumbs, a handful of crispy French onions, side salad or vegetable of your choice, bottle of Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir, or a cranberry kombucha. Put on a medium-sized pot of salted water to boil. While the water is boiling, prepare your other ingredients. Grate the cheese and set it aside. Dice the onion and garlic and flake the tuna and toss them together with the frozen peas in a large mixing bowl and set it aside. Once the water has boiled, add the pasta to cook, but only par cook. This is very important or you will have mushy noodles when all is said and done. Once the noodles are half cooked, drain them and toss them into the onion, garlic, tuna, and pea mixture, evenly distributing it through the noodles. Set this aside. If you are trying to moderate how much gluten is in your diet, you can use a gluten-free noodle. If you do, it is even more important to only par cook the noodles. Gluten-free pasta has a particularly horrible texture when it is overcooked. In a saucepan over medium heat, add the butter and flour. Using a whisk, stir them together as the butter melts. Once the mixture is smooth and bubbling, it has darkened a bit in color, add the milk, whisking continually to incorporate the roux. Once the milk has come up to temperature and begun to thicken, start adding your grated cheese, 1 handful at a time, whisking until it melts and is incorporated. Once you get about 2/3 of the cheese incorporated, turn the heat off and finish adding the rest. Once the cheese sauce is all smooth, pour it over the pasta mixture and stir with a wooden spoon to cover completely. Salt and pepper to taste. Then transfer the mix into a casserole dish and sprinkle with the breadcrumbs and French onions. Cover with foil and bake for 40 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Then remove the foil and bake for an additional 5 to 10 minutes or until the top has some crispies on it. Serve with a side salad or green beans, fresh baked bread, and either a glass of red wine or, for something a little different, try a cranberry kombucha. Kombucha is a fermented beverage with a very low alcohol content. There are many brands on the market and many flavors. The beverage is a wonderful digestive aid. This recipe serves up to 6 people. Okay, so now let's talk about my slightly lower calorie version of mac and cheese. It's not the creamy bliss my mother's recipe is, but it's very good. Like I said, I make both her version and my altered version. Whichever one I make, I will sometimes split my batch into 2 or more smaller casserole dishes, cover with wax paper, plastic wrap foil, and a fitted lid, and freeze for later. If you are freezing the dish, allow it to thaw overnight in the refrigerator before baking it. This is a good option for Omar and I because if I make the whole thing at once, it is more than we can eat and it goes stale before we can finish it. As middle-aged fuddy-duddies, we have no business sitting down and eating 3 full servings each of mac and cheese at once, regardless of which recipe I make. So, this is how you make my altered version. Ingredients. 1 1-pound box, pasta like springs, medium shells, corkscrews, penne, bow ties, or rigatoni. You can use smaller pasta like elbows if you want, but I find without the cream sauce, slightly larger pasta works out better. 1 medium red onion or large shallot diced. 1 head garlic minced. 1 cup chopped parsley. 2 teaspoons dried oregano. 1 teaspoon red pepper flakes or half a fresh habanero minced. 1½ cups of your favorite grated cheese or a mix of cheeses. I like to use smoked mozzarella, Swiss, and Gouda. 2 to 3 tablespoons corn or potato starch. 1 cup cottage cheese, 8 button mushrooms chopped. ½ pound fresh spinach chopped coarse or 2 broccoli crowns blanched and chopped medium. 1/4 cup sliced Kalamata olives with 2 tablespoons of juice from the jar. 2 to 3 fresh Roma tomatoes diced. Optional, 1 small jar of marinated artichoke hearts chopped, salt and pepper to taste, enough olive oil to coat the baking dish, 4 pats of butter, 1/3 cup breadcrumbs, a bottle of Lambrusco. Put on a medium-sized pot of salted water to boil. While the water is boiling, prepare the veggies. Put the cottage cheese, all the chopped vegetables, herbs, and spices in a mixing bowl, mix together thoroughly. Omit the hot peppers if you don't like it spicy. In another bowl, grate your other cheeses. Add the starch and toss, slightly coating all the small pieces of cheese. Once the water is boiling, par-cook your pasta. It is okay in this version if the pasta is even a little less than par-cooked. A lot of water comes out of the spinach, mushrooms, and tomatoes, so the pasta can take it. Drain the pasta and mix it through the vegetable mixture. Then stir through the cheese and starch mixture. You don't want to mix the cheese and starch in first because it will glob up and not mix evenly. Oil the bottom and sides of a casserole dish or lasagna pan. I use Pam olive oil spray. Add the pasta mixture. Place 4 pats of butter on the top, sprinkle with breadcrumbs, and cover the dish with foil. Bake covered at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. Serve immediately with fresh baked bread and a bottle of Lambrusco, or like I mentioned in the other version, kombucha. Since this version is full of veggies, you don't need to make a salad or side vegetable. If you are worried about protein, you can add a can of tuna or anchovies or even a meat substitute to the mix before baking. I've had success using a chicken substitute called alpha strips. With or without the protein added, Omar says he prefers this version of mac and cheese. I guess this is technically more of a pasta bake, but the starch added to the cheese does create a slightly creamy effect. Gluten-free pasta is also an option in this dish. This recipe serves 4 to 6 people. Another Lenten favorite is clam chowder. When I was waitressing in college, every diner I worked served it on Fridays the entire year through. Only one of the places I worked made it from scratch. Most diners served canned soups or maybe 1 or 2 house-made. Then I worked for George's Coney Island. When I worked for George's Coney Island, all of the soups were homemade. I can't speak to the state of the Coney Island restaurants these days, but George's Coney Island was probably the best eatery where I ever worked. With the exception of the Coney brand chili and hot dogs, everything on the menu was fresh and house-made. I don't remember her name, but an older Albanian woman came in early in the morning every day to make the soups, stuffed peppers, cabbage rolls, meatloaf, spinach pies, tuna salad, Greek salad dressing, and any specials on the menu. One of the biggest secrets was the chicken noodle soup was actually turkey noodle soup. It was just more cost effective, and there wasn't much of a difference in flavor once it was all done in the bowl. I'm not sure how she did it, but her clam chowder every Friday was so thick and creamy. In addition to the avgolemono soup, her clam chowder was a community favorite. Many of my regulars came in on Fridays just for a bowl. Mine's creamy too, but hers was like a gravy. It was amazing, especially with a side of Greek salad with that salad dressing. The recipe for that dressing was probably the thing George protected the most. There were folks that would come in just to buy a few small side containers of that dressing. But I digress. Let's get back to the chowder. Traditionally, in the United States, clam chowder is probably most familiarly associated with New England. There are two popular versions of American clam chowder, New England style and Manhattan style. The New England style is the white, creamy version most common. Manhattan style is a red broth style and not creamy. It is very similar in preparation to cioppino, an Italian mixed seafood soup. I've made that one too, but when it comes to clams, I prefer the white creamy sibling to the red brothy one. Most traditionally, in New England, the soup is made with a base roux constructed using bacon fat. I do not do this ever, and most restaurants outside of New England don't either. But it is a good thing to ask if your diet is pork product restricted, or it is Lent and you are trying to avoid land animal meat. I learned about the bacon fat in New England when my family took a summer vacation to Rhode Island when I was in middle school. It was quite a trip. Me, my parents, two sisters, my mother's parents, and my cousin Brad piled into our giant station wagon and drove up the East Coast from Pennsylvania to stay in a beach house on stilts on the Rhode Island coast. While there, we visited Massachusetts as well. In Boston, there were signs everywhere for baked beans and clam chowder. I wasn't interested in their baked beans. My mother's baked beans were and are the best as far as I was concerned, but I sure wanted one of those big round bread bowls filled with steamy, creamy soup and served with a giant sweet hard ball the waiter called a chowder cracker. The New England summers aren't like Florida summers or even New Jersey or Carolina summers. They have pretty warm days from time to time in New England, but the coast is more rocky than sandy, and the fog is thick, making days and evenings cooler. Where there are expanses of sand on the beach, you will find clams and people digging them. Chowder is good all year round. So, when my bread bowl of chowder arrived, I took my first bite and was shocked by the flavor of bacon. It was delicious, as bacon is. But I had never tasted it like that before. When the waiter came back to the table, I asked him about it. He explained to me that's what makes it authentically New England clam chowder and not just New England style chowder. It is the only place in the country where I have had clam chowder where the roux base was bacon fat and flour. I also make a mixed seafood cheddar chowder that is similar to clam chowder. I have made both during Lent and throughout the year. I will share them both with you. When making clam chowder, I sometimes will use fresh clams when they have them at the market, but I have found it is easier to use canned clams because purging the sand from fresh live clams can be challenging, and sand really ruins your chowder. Last time I used fresh clams, we ended up tossing the pot, and I was really bummed. I don't like wasting food, particularly when I have prepared an animal. The soup tasted amazing, but it was so sandy it was hard on your teeth. So it goes, I suppose. Anyway, so this is how you make my New Englandish style clam chowder. Ingredients: 2 cans whole baby clams or chopped clams in water, 1 medium white onion diced, 2 carrots diced, 5 stalks of celery with leaves chopped, 1 large russet potato cubed, half a stick of butter, 1 head of garlic minced, 1 bay leaf, 1 tablespoon whole peppercorns, 1 bunch fresh parsley chopped coarse, half a teaspoon dried thyme, half a teaspoon dried rosemary, enough water. I will explain this further in the directions. 1 can evaporated milk plus 1 can water, 1/3 a cup of potato starch, salt to taste, a bottle of Fumé Blanc or Chenin Blanc, fresh baked bread. Directions. In a soup pot, put the butter, onion, carrot, celery, potato, bay leaf, pepper, corns, and rosemary. Sauté over medium-low heat until the onions begin to go transparent at the edges. Add the garlic, thyme, and clams with the water they are packed in. Add enough water to just cover the veggies. Turn the heat up to medium and cover. After 10 minutes, test the veggies to see if they are soft yet. You don't want the veggies to be so mushy they are falling apart, but you don't want them crunchy at all. Once the veggies are just right, turn the heat down to low, taste for salt, and cover. In a saucepan, whisk together the evaporated milk plus 1 can of water and the potato starch over medium heat until it begins to become very thick. You don't want any lumps, so whisk the starch well. Once it is very thick, and I mean thick, add it to the larger pot and stir it through until it is all mixed and creamy. If it seems too thin, turn the heat up a bit and stir it until it begins to thicken more. But be careful, potato starch can go from creamy to gelatinous quickly if you aren't watching. Mix through parsley and serve either in fresh baked bread bowls or with fresh bread. A side salad of your choice and a glass of Fumé Blanc or Chenin Blanc. I don't bother with crackers when I make fresh bread. It's up to you. The other chowder I make is a creamy, cheesy, mixed seafood chowder. According to the Women's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery, Volume 3, page 417, chowder is a thick, hearty soup that probably originated in New England but takes its name from a large French kettle, the chaudière. It usually contains fish or seafood, salt pork, vegetables, and milk. There are also all vegetable chowders. Of all my books and references on cookery, my complete collection of the Women's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery by Fawcett Publications, Inc., New York, is by far my most beloved. It is an incredible wealth of culinary knowledge and information. I don't know if they still publish this collection, but if you ever find a set, I highly recommend getting it. I got mine from my maternal grandmother. She told me she received it as a gift, but I don't remember who she said gave it to her, her mother or one of her sisters. The set was published after World War II and is interesting because it discusses the new invention of Crisco and other petroleum-era products and how to use them. It also covers culinary techniques and traditions from all over the world. My grandmother gave me the set as part of my engagement gift at my bridal shower. The set is an amazing resource and capsule of history and culture as it was expressed and understood at the time. The illustrations are lovely, and anything I have tried from its pages have been delicious. The mixed seafood cheddar chowder I make is an adaptation of a recipe I found within the encyclopedia's pages. I found the original recipe the first Lenten season Omar and I were married, and have adapted it over the years to suit our tastes and sensibilities. My recipe is not the recipe in the book, but it is inspired by it, so this is how you make it. Ingredients: 1 can of tuna packed in water, drained and flaked, 1 cup raw rock shrimp shelled and veined, 1/4 cup fresh bay scallops, these are the small ones, 5 stalks celery with leaves chopped, 1 large russet potato diced, 2 carrots diced, 1 large yellow onion diced, 1 bay leaf, 2 strong sprigs of fresh rosemary, 1 teaspoon of black peppercorns, 1 head garlic minced, 1 cup chopped fresh parsley, 3 chopped green onions, enough water, salt to taste, 4 tablespoons of hot sauce of your choice. I like to use a Chipotle chili hot sauce. Tabasco and Cholula both make a good one. 1 can evaporated milk plus 1 can water, 1 stick butter, 1/4 cup flour, 1 large brick sharp cheddar cheese grated, bottle of Pinot Noir or Cab Franc, a fresh baked loaf of bread. Directions. In a soup pot, put the seafood, onion, carrot, celery, garlic, potato, bay leaf, rosemary, and peppercorns. Add enough water to just cover the ingredients in the pot. Cover and bring to a boil over medium-high heat until the veggies are fork tender. Reduce heat and taste to add salt. Recover. In a saucepan over medium heat, whisk together the flour and butter. Once it is bubbling and the roux has darkened slightly in color, add the evaporated milk plus 1 can water, whisking constantly, removing any lumps. Once the bechamel is up to temperature and thickening, add the cheese, a handful at a time, whisking continually until it is all incorporated evenly. Add the cheese sauce to the pot with the seafood and vegetables and stir until smooth. Remove the bay leaf and rosemary stems, add the parsley and green onions and stir through. Serve with extra hot sauce on the side, a side salad of your choice, fresh baked bread, and a glass of Pinot Noir or Cabernet Franc. This recipe serves up to 6 when served with a salad and bread. You could choose to omit the seafood altogether and make it entirely lacto-ovo-vegetarian. You just need to adjust the salt a bit, and I would also add a couple drops of liquid smoke. All this talk of soup is comforting and mouth-watering. If Lent fell a little later in the year than it does, I would also have to include my stinging nettle soup. But nettles generally come into season after Easter, so it will have to wait for another cookbook. Stinging nettle is an herbaceous vegetable that I wild forage on our property. It grows widely across the North American continent and is considered by most people as a troublesome weed. Indeed, the plant, if not picked and consumed early while it is young, becomes very tall and is covered in stinging needle-like points on the leaves and stems that will leave your hands feeling insect-bitten for a few days in a most uncomfortable way. It's the young shoots that you want to make the soup, but even those can sting your fingers. Stinging nettles are a traditional remedy for sinus and upper respiratory issues and are very high in essential vitamins and minerals. But as I said, nettles aren't found during the Lenten season, so I must move on to one of my favorite soups of all, vegetable soup. My vegetable soup, of course, is entirely vegetarian. In fact, I often make it in such a way that it is vegan, but that's only if someone is visiting who is vegan, or if I am running low on butter and don't have egg noodles on hand. When you order vegetable soup in a restaurant, it is a good idea to clarify if it is in fact vegetarian, if that is of concern for you. Many people make vegetable soup with a beef base or bone broth. Either would most certainly not be suitable for Lent or vegetarians of any type. Growing up, my Grandma Rose always had a pot of soup ready for visitors. It was most often the oxtail and vegetable soup taught to her by my grandfather's mother, Mary Dropcho-Funyak. I haven't made that pot of soup in years, and certainly not during Lent, but it is a delicious soup, and this book is quite nostalgic. Great-Grandma Funyak's soup was prepared and served in a very specific fashion. First of all, until she got too old to do it, she made fresh egg noodles to go in the soup. Also, the way the stock was made is interesting. First, the oxtail went into the pot of water and was boiled for a while until the aspic and fat just started to create a foam at the top. Then the vegetables and seasonings were added, and the vegetables were only very minimally cut if they were cut at all. The onion was only cut in half, as was the cabbage and potato. Celery and carrots were left in pieces 3 to 4 inches in length, and the tomatoes were dropped in whole. Then, before it was served, all the vegetables were removed from the pot and placed in a large serving bowl, and the oxtails were placed on another dish. Both were placed on the table. Each person eating would then fill their bowl with noodles and the clear, flavorful broth. Once seated at the table, each person would choose what vegetables and/or pieces of meat they wanted, and that was either added back into their bowl of soup or placed on a separate side plate and eaten with bread. Then the fighting began over who got to scrape the remaining aspic from the center of the bone and spread it on a slice of bread. The aspic was not a delicacy I was ever interested in trying, but watching my father and his siblings fight over it amused me. The soup was amazing. The vegetable soup I make is based on my maternal grandmother's recipe. I just love vegetable soup. She did too. She said it was her favorite thing that her mother, Daisy Leeds, made when she was growing up. She said my great-grandmother made a pot almost every week. The most important vegetables in vegetable soup is cabbage. Without it, it's just not the same. Of course, cabbage soup is amazing too and is often vegetarian, but it's not quite the same thing as vegetable soup. When I waited tables at the Ram's Horn in Rochester Hills, Michigan, the soup they made homemade every day was cabbage soup. It was amazing, probably the best thing on the menu, surprisingly. Like the clam chowder and the avgalemino at George's Coney Island, people came in just for the Ram's Horn's cabbage soup. All the time I worked there, I never seemed to be on the schedule when they were making it. It was their secret, but that's okay. My vegetable soup is pretty darn good too. This is how you make it. Ingredients. One small to medium-sized head of cabbage, green cabbage, cut in half. The nice round-headed green cabbage, not Napa or curly cabbage. 2 russet potatoes cut in quarters, 2 carrots chopped coarsely, half a bunch of celery with leaves chopped into 1-inch pieces, 1 large yellow onion, 2 bay leaves, 6 ripe Roma tomatoes, whole, 1 teaspoon black peppercorns, half a cup frozen corn, half a cup frozen peas, half a cup frozen green beans, half a cup frozen lima beans, 1 head garlic minced, half a teaspoon ginger paste, salt to taste, 1 teaspoon dried thyme, 1 teaspoon dried oregano, half a teaspoon dried sage, 1/4 teaspoon celery seed, 1 tablespoon coriander seed, a 1-inch piece of kombu seaweed, 1 bunch fresh flat leaf parsley, chopped coarse, 1 bag egg noodles or orzo pasta, enough water, half a stick of butter or 1/3 cup olive oil, juice of 1 fresh lemon, a bottle of blush wine, a loaf of fresh baked bread. Directions. In a large soup pot, put all the ingredients except the noodles, parsley, lemon juice, or wine. The wine is for drinking. Cover all the ingredients with water so they are submerged by 2 to 4 inches. Stir and bring to a boil over medium-high heat. Reduce the heat to medium and taste for salt. Allow to simmer until all of the veggies are soft and tender. Periodically tasting for salt until desired level is reached. Once the veggies are tender, boil a pot of salted water and cook the noodles. Drain them well and set aside. Stir through the lemon juice and parsley. Serve over the noodles with fresh baked bread and a glass of blush wine. You don't need any extra veggies, and the protein is complete between the peas, lima beans, corn, pasta, and bread. A bean and a grain make a complete protein. This recipe serves up to 6. When it comes to the noodles, make as much as you want. It's up to you how many noodles are in your soup. My great-grandma Daisy Leeds would probably have had a glass of her homemade dandelion wine with this. Her dandelion wine recipe was coveted by everyone who tried it, I'm told. Evidently, there is a relative or two out there who know how to make it, but they have vowed to take the information to the grave with them. Imagine that. Imagine that. Anyway, bon appetito.